Today we talk about sampling. Chapter 5. Sampling is to focus on how we use the sample drawn from a population to represent the population. I can try to use this kind of figure and to describe this. So here is a population. So if we take one sample out of that and use that small sample and to describe or generalize the population, and that is a sampling process. There are several key terms we need to understand. Number one, population. That is the entire set of individual or entity to which study findings are to be generalized. Population here not only includes people, but also the things or atoms. Elements, the individual members of the population whose characteristics are to be measured. Sampling frame. Sampling frame is a list of all elements or other units containing the elements in a population. So where can we find the sampling frame for Pacific students on campus? So the sampling frame can be found in the register office. So because over there you can have a sampling frame, a list of Pacific students. Sample generalizability depends on the sample quality, which is determined by the amount of sampling errors, the difference between characteristic of sample and the characteristic of population from which it was selected. The larger the sampling error, the less representative the sample, and thus the less generalizable the findings. And here we have this population. And look at this. This population have a 33% of people satisfied. On this side, this small sample, which 66% of people satisfied, and this one is 33. So therefore, this particular sample is a better or representative sample to the population. The most important distinction that needs to be made about samples is whether they are based on the probability or non-probability sampling method. Sampling methods that allow us to know in advance how likely it is that any element of population will be selected for the sample are termed probability sampling method. Sampling methods that do not let us know in advance the likelihood of selecting each element are termed non-probability sampling methods. Under probability sampling method, there's 4 types of random sampling methods. They are very popular. Number 1, simple random sampling. This method requires some procedure that generates numbers or otherwise identifies cases strictly on the basis of chance. I want to emphasize that this simple random sampling has a major criteria, which is every subject or object has equal chance to be selected. This is a foundation. This is the foundation for the random sampling. Random digital styling is another method for using random sampling, but this is only apply for telephone calls. For example, if we want to study Stockton people, and say we have 40 prefix, so let's say 209, 946, so 946 is a prefix. And then we have, let's say, 478. So let's say if we select these 2 prefixed, so the rest of the number we can use computer generate random numbers. So then if we use this method to call people in Stockton, we are using random digital dialing method. Systematic random sampling, it follows that every nth element to be selected. So this every nth refers to that if we want to study, let's say, Stockton Pacific students, so our total population is 4,000. If we want to study 400 people, so we have to calculate sampling interval. So sampling interval equals to population over sample. So in this case, it's 10. So that means every 10 students will be selected. So that is systematic random sampling. Stratified random sampling is based on that we try to make sure that every subgroup in the sample can be adequately represented. For example, we want to study African American in Washington State. African American, say 3% African American in that state. If we want to study, say, survey 400 people, so the correct number should be 12 African American. But if we do a random sampling, we may not get that 12 people. So in order to make sure that that particular group can be adequately represented, so we have to first find a sampling frame for African American to randomly select 12 people. Then the 388 people we can select in the second time. By doing that, we can make sure that African American group can be selected adequately. Now we move from probability sampling to non-probability sampling. In non-probability sampling, we have these very popular four methods. They are availability sampling. It depends on availability of the subjects or objects. Quota sampling, we follow certain quota to select subjects. Purposive sampling, we specifically to select certain group of people or certain type of people. Snowball sampling is that we first find X per individual, and the X can introduce and the Y can introduce Z, and so on and so forth. We can select what we want to survey and study. Particularly people like to do the study homeless people, and using snowball sampling is the best way to do. Qualitative research also focuses on the population that are hard to locate or very limited in size. In consequences, such non-probability sampling methods as available sampling and snowball sampling are often used in the qualitative research. Two methods in qualitative research. One is to study the typical cases or study multi-site study, and by doing those, and the qualitative research can be completed. If we want to use a sample to calculate for the sampling errors or to project the total population, that particular statistical analysis called inferential statistics, a mathematical tool for estimating how likely it is that statistical results based on data from a random sample is representative of the population from which the sample is assumed to have been selected. Determine the sample size, and usually when we do a survey, and 400 people is the ideal size, and 300 people is a very good. And sometimes you can see that we have 1,000 people or 1,500 or 2,500 for national kind of sample size. Those are the very good size for doing national kind of survey. And that will do for today's sampling topic.